Hello, this is Steve, and I'm reading from The Wine Spectator. Argentina Tasting Report, Masters of the Mountains. After years of effort, Argentina's winemakers are dialing into their high elevation vineyards. Argentine Malbec has been in the spotlight for the past few decades as vintners have transformed their country into a formidable player on the global stage. Yet one aspect of Argentina's wine culture is only now gaining widespread recognition: winemakers' intimate relationship with the mountains. My purpose is to try and show the world the specialness we have, mountain-grown grapes, says Lucas Lowy, estate director for Bodegas Terrazas de los Andes. Early on, the message of Malbec was very generic. Today, the future of Malbec reflects the diversity of soils, elevation, and exposition that make up Mendoza's complex mountain terroir. Since my previous report, Argentina Exploration and Expansion, November 30th, 2023, I have reviewed more than 200 wines from Argentina in blind tastings at our Napa office. Malbec remains the pillar of everything the country does, representing the vast majority of wines in this report, with nearly two-thirds of those notching ratings of 90 points or higher on the Wine Spectator's 100-point scale. The trend in recent years is that the most prized bottlings come from growing areas with high elevations of greater than 3,000 feet. In the 1990s, there began to be a move away from the warmer, lower elevation vineyards within the Primera Zona around the city of Mendoza. At the time, many thought ripening grapes at higher elevation on the city's outskirts and in nearby Uco Valley, where temperatures are cooler and conditions harsher, would be a lofty dream. Fast forward to today, and the Uco Valley accounts for 40% of the vines in Mendoza. These vineyards are the perfect place to talk about the state of the Argentine wine industry, as they contribute to more than one-third of the top-scoring Malbecs this year. In many cases, it can take generations of work in a vineyard to demonstrate terroir in a finished wine, yet the Argentinians have made up for lost time through equal parts of science and intuition to create terroir-driven wines. Learning to cultivate at higher elevations in Argentina meant more than just harnessing a climate prone to both frost and intense sunlight. Vintners first had to look at the ground where they wanted their vines. There is a lot of diversity, Catena Zapata winemaking director Alejandro Vigil says about mountain soils. You have to think hard before planting. The further you go into the mountains, the more heterogeneous the soils tend to become. Vineyard blocks can change their profile or depth within just a few feet. With such unpredictable terrain, scientific analysis of the soils is compulsory, including the soil pits, satellite mapping, and more. A prime example is Catena Zapata's 245-acre Adriana vineyard in Gualtalari, which lies at 4,757 feet. Every insect, microorganism, and patch of dirt has been scrupulously examined, resulting in more than 200 separate lots of wine being vinified annually, including two of its most celebrated parcel wines, the Malbec Mendoza Adriana Vineyard Fortunatere, 95 points, $140, and Chardonnay Mendoza Adriana Vineyard White Bones, 95 points, $140, which are among the top scoring wines in this report. That same level of intricacy is applied at Famiglia Zuccardi. You can have great terroir, but without knowledge, you can't give an accurate interpretation, says Sebastian Zuccardi. We divide blocks by soils to be more precise, and then divide what may seem the same into multiple subparcels. When planting the winery's Finca Las Cerriadas at 4,462 feet, the source for the top-scoring Malbec Gualtalari Finca Las Cerriadas, 2021, 95 points, $175. Zuccardi says he only put vines where he found the most interesting soils, leaving the rest to natural vegetation. As a result, only 47 of the 79 acres are planted, divided into 30 parcels. I believe natural vegetation is important in expressing wines we want to make, he adds. Lowy of Terrazas feels the same about the winery's Finca El Spenillo in Gualtalari, which lies at 5,413 feet. When we leave cover crops and native herbs, we feel them in fermentation, he says, enriching biodiversity and bringing back the area's original flora and fauna give us a more terroir-driven wine. Outside of Uco Valley, the partners at Bodega Mil Suelos, Jeff Mausbach, Jorge Crota, and winemaker Alejandro Sejanovic are exploring uncharted territories. In 2015, the trio partnered with an existing vineyard in Uspallata, a remote area northwest of Mendoza. Planted in 2008, the 10-acre site within a canyon at 6,500 feet is unlike anything the team had worked with in Argentina. Mausbach describes the profile as shallow and sandy, with rocky surface stones from colluvial erosion, made up of porphyrines and limestone. Before the first vintage, he says, they told the vineyard owner, "Let's see what we have and then talk." After the wine finished fermenting, they wanted to talk immediately, and now they manage the vineyard. The Malbec from this vineyard reminds me of the Northern Rhone, Mausbach says. Indeed, the Malbec Mendoza Estancia Upsallata 2020, 94 points, $75, evokes the Rhone's distinctive garrigue, black pepper and rosemary elements, while offering a generously fruited Malbec core and polished tannins. A Malbec such as Estancia Upsallata further stratifies the category in a good way. Most consumers may not realize the diversity Malbec is now capable of, considering it wasn't long ago that most versions were inherently quaffable with soft tannins and lots of ripe, fruity character. Spicy, floral, Rhone-style Malbecs offer a distinctive style in comparison, with bolder versions from Mendoza's warmer areas such as Bodega Luigi Bosca's Paraiso Lujan de Cuello 2021, 92 points, $170, which leads with savory details of olive and tobacco, or Pascual Toso's rich and opulent Magdalena Toso Barracas Vineyard Mendoza 2021, 92 points, $135. Meanwhile, at the other end of the spectrum, there are cooler climate wines such as Viña Cobos Elegant and Spicy Malbec Mendoza Cobos 2021, 95 points, $400, which is primarily from Uco Valley, and Piros Pure and Redolent Malbec Pedernal Valley Limestone Hill 2021, 93 points, $110, from a remote area north of Mendoza with comparable temperatures and soils to the Uco Valley. For more on Viña Cobos flagship bottling, see Commemorating Cobos. Mil Suelos Rhone inspiration led to a deeper exploration of the French region's winemaking techniques. Mausbach and Sejanovic remember thinking, what do stems bring to the table in extreme elevation? They learned that the combination of Argentina's intense sun and cool nighttime temperatures leads to fully mature stems, so including them became an obvious way to express terroir. We want to extract stems for aromatics, Sejanovic explains, noting that process starts earlier during fermentation. As alcohol increases, there's a danger of dry or bitter textures, so we're more aggressive with punch downs or pump overs to get those garrigue and aromatic spicy qualities. Both Lowy and Zaccardi concur. Zaccardi says that he uses 100% stems in his bottlings from Paraje Altamira, but only 30 to 50% in the versions from Gualtallery. Gualtallery has a higher level of tannin and structure, he says. If I push too much, I end up with aggressive wines. Stems are part of terroir, but they are a way to intensify aromas, being truthful to the terroir, Lowy says, adding that the ideal percentage stems from his Gualtallery wines is 15%. Beyond that, he believes aging partially in amphora helps to retain freshness. To his point, Bodegas Terrazas de los Andes Malbec, Gualtallery Extremo El Espinillo Vineyard 2021, 92 points, $200, is quite elegant and precise for Malbec, and is the intensely fragrant Malbec, Los Chicayes, Parcel 12, Lican Vineyard 2021, 93 points, $100. In addition to the use of stems, many winemakers have adopted other techniques similar to those for Pinot Noir, aiming at pure expressions of Malbec. These include open-top fermenters, as well as neutral vessels, such as concrete, amphora, and used oak. The idea is to cultivate wines, and it's important to show the place, Zaccardi says. This focus on terroir has dovetailed with winemakers' increasing know-how in the cellar, resulting in expressive, structured Malbecs that are enjoyable in their youth, but also built to age, another sign of the grape's rise in prominence. Given the limited production and high prices, some of Argentina's site-specific wines can be challenging to track down. The good news is that there's still plenty of value to be found. More than half of the Malbecs under review cost $50 or less, including outstanding regional examples outside the ultra-premium category that still showcase their terroir, such as Bodega Mil Suelos Malbec Paraje Altamira Finca La Escuela, 2022, 93 points, $30. Finca Sofinia Malbec Gualtari Estate Reserva, 2022, 93 points, $25. And Matervini Malbec Los Chacoyes Tinto 2021, 93 points, $35. Consistent vintages have been on Argentina's side in recent years, yet Argentina has not been immune to as wine sales have softened worldwide. As a result, the primary vintages in the market continue to be 2021 and 22, both of them excellent years that are worth seeking out. The balance is perfect, and the texture is similar to 2019, says Vigil of the 2022 vintage, while noting that 2021, a remarkably cool year, delivered wines with great freshness and precision, but less volume on the palate. Accounting for roughly a third of the wines in this report, 2022 saw slightly lower yields due to early frosts. The vintage was also a little warmer compared to 2021, though harvest time temperatures were cooler, allowing optimal development. Vigil and others report the 22 Malbecs as more generous than 21, yet still with tremendous levels of natural acidity despite the warmer season. If you ask Argentina's winemakers, most will say their future lies in the country's mountainous regions. There is a caveat, however: water. The amount of water in Mendoza is limited. If vintners want to explore new terroirs, they'll likely have to go elsewhere. That's no trouble for Mil Suelos, which, after traveling to Uspallata, has gone to the extreme, working with a vineyard partner in the faraway northwestern province of Jujuy, near the Chilean and Bolivian borders at nearly 9,000 feet in elevation. It's a small, developing area, but we're bullish on it, says Mausbach. The wines show a lot of character. Over the past decade, Catena has also invested in areas outside of Mendoza, including Patagonia and Salta, as well as a lesser-known region, La Rioja, which lies roughly midway between Mendoza and Salta. Vigil describes the place as having beautiful red mountains with lots of iron. You can feel it in the wines, he says. Yet he admits that the vineyard still shows touches of rusticity and that you need time to truly understand the character of a place. Vigil identifies three critical factors for great terroir: temperature, soil, and vine age. Younger vines don't tend to express terroir like older vines do, but terroir becomes more important as time goes on. With each passing year, vintners who invested in high-elevation vineyards are seeing their efforts pay off. Exploring Argentina's geology and respecting the unique traits of every site has led to a deeper understanding of the country's terroirs. Wine lovers are reaping the benefits. Rating red wine vintages in Argentina. 2022, not yet rated, a roller coaster vintage with spring frosts followed by a relatively cool, damp season, ending with another frost, but the harvest warmed at the right time, yielding expressive wines with optimal acidity, concentration, and ripeness. 2021, 94 points. An atypical harvest requiring patience and technical expertise, with cool temperatures and rain slowing ripening. Reds are concentrated as a result, yet relatively lower in alcohol, while yields were average or slightly below. Drink or hold. 2020, 92 points. A challenging vintage, with late spring frosts reducing yields and a warm, dry summer causing accelerated ripening. Those who picked before over-ripening set in made wines with good concentration and freshness. Drink or hold. 2019, 94 points. Slightly cooler than normal weather yields reds with concentrated flavors. The crop is a bit smaller than 2018, with wines showing remarkable intensity. Drink or hold. 2018, 93 points. Nearly identical growing conditions deliver well-structured wines that feature fine-grained tannins and ripe fruit flavors. Harvest yields return after a series of short vintages. Recommended wines from Argentina. Top wines: Bodega Catena Zapata, Malbec Mendoza, Adriana Vineyard, Fortuna Terre. Leading with lilac and mineral aromas, this elegant version offers cherry and plum flavors defined with precise mineral tension. 95 points, $140. Finca Sofinia, Malbec Gualtari Synthesis 2022. This alluring red is silky and polished, but with a measure of acidity that lets the flavors of plum, berry, and preserves come gushing forth. 95 points, $70. Bodegas Mil Suelos, Malbec Mendoza Estancia Upsayata. This red evokes the Rhone with its notes of garrigue, black pepper, and rosemary that swirl around a ripe and generous blackberry core. Pascual Toso, Mendoza, Alta Barrancas Vineyards, 2021. Aromatically alluring with notes of dried violet, truffle, and milk chocolate, leading to a smooth textured core of plum and cherry fruit. Top values. Luca, Malbec Paraje Altamira 2021, 93 points, $25. Aromas of violet, orange peel, and wet ash lead to notes of raspberry and plum on the palate with just enough acidity to lift the flavors. Kaiken, Malbec Mendoza Ultra 2021. There's a wild, alluring quality to this red, with chaparral and mountain herb notes, plus olive, peppercorn, and fresh leather accents. 92 points, $26. La Posta, Malbec Mendoza Pizzella. Fresh and inviting, with notes of grated nutmeg and dried rose petal, joining a juicy core of pomegranate and plum on a suave frame. 90 points, $20. Commemorating Cobos. An exclusive tasting of Paul Hobbs' flagship Vinho Cobos bottling reveals the winery's 25-year evolution. We began in 1998, widely regarded as the worst vintage in the last 50 years, recalls Vinho Cobos founder Paul Hobbs. 26 years ago, Hobbs and his business partners, winemaker Louis Barrault and his wife Andrea Marchiori, teamed up to study Malbec grown in vineyards north of Argentina's Mendoza River. As a California-based winemaker who had spent the previous decade consulting with Bodega Catena Zapata, Hobbs was curious to explore the terroirs of Mendoza. After abandoning the 1998 vintage, the team pressed on. Nico Volturno, Marchioli's father, had already agreed to the use of his 5.5 acres of old vine Malbec in the Perdriel vintage region within Luján de Cuyo, just south of the city of Mendoza. That vineyard, along with grapes contracted from small local growers, would be the source of the Verse Vinho Cobos wines from the 1999 vintage. Yet some of his partners at the time didn't respect contracts, Hobbs says, recalling that there was a buzz around town about how they were preparing vineyards for the harvest. Some influential local wineries, using the threat of an incoming storm, convinced the growers to pick all the grapes for them, paying them in cash. When Hobbs and his team arrived, there was no fruit. I thought, well, how foolish of us, Hobbs says. But that changed the business model. The plan was no longer going to be a study on the upper Mendoza River. It was to study Malbec with one vineyard, the Marchioli Vineyard. Although Vinho Cobos celebrated its 25th anniversary this year, the winery's flagship Cobos bottling might never have taken its place as one of the country's most distinguished wines, if not for those questionable grape contracts and early missteps. In May, Hobbs and I took stock of this foundational label by tasting 11 vintages going back to 2003. Limited inventory and early storage issues at a rented space before Cobos constructed its own winery prevented every vintage from being tasted, including the debut 1999, which was among Argentina's top-scoring wines that year, notching an outstanding 92 points. Senior editor James Molesworth, who reviewed the wines of Argentina at the time, noted that the Cobos raised the bar for Argentine Malbec. If not for some grit and determination on Hobbs' part, the 1999 wouldn't have made it to bottle either. The growing season was nearly as wet and disastrous as 1998, but Hobbs, anxious about waiting things out after a heavy rain, instructed everyone to roll up their pants and get to work. It was like we were picking in a rice paddy, he laughs, but it worked, and we made a good vintage. Although Hobbs was able to get some contracted growers to work with him, challenging vintages persisted, and no wines were made from the 2001 vintage. We had only one good vintage in the first 4 years, he says. By 2001, things were pretty dire, and there were moments when we were thinking of closing up. During those tough years, the limited production of the Cobs bottling, as well as less than ideal quality, led to other entry-level wines in the Vinho Cobos portfolio, including Felino and Bramare. But by 2003, Hobbs felt that his team was dialed into the Marchiori vineyard, and that's when things began to take flight. At the time, few wineries were producing single-vineyard ultra-premium Malbec, Yet Hobbs confidently raised the price of Cobos bottling from $60 to $150. This made Vinho Cobos one of the handful of wines in Argentina charging triple digits. The gamble paid off. Cobos has become an Argentine icon, earning 90 points or higher with every vintage, including 9 classic scores of 95 plus. This has continued to the price has continued to increase as well, reaching $400 in recent years. Hobbs calls the first 10 vintages his early homework on Malbec, and you can taste the style choices he was making along the way. At the time, Marchiori Vineyard featured 70 and 80-year-old vines planted on loamy silt and clay soils. These often resulted in richly textured and concentrated wines, but Hobbs wanted to push the limits on how far he could go. Just wanted to see where the point of no return was, he says, citing the 2006 vintage as the moment when he may have gone too far. We stopped irrigation and the vines seemed to be okay, but the next spring after bud break, we didn't get any growth, and we realized that the vines had no more energy. Indeed, 2007 is the outlier among the 11 vintage tasted. It lacks the plush, fruity qualities of the other bottlings, tilting more toward savory elements. The color is also noticeably less vibrant than the others in the same age bracket. Hobbs trialed oak levels as well. In those days, most top-end Argentine Malbecs were being made with 200% new oak, he says, noting that the closest he came was using 100% new oak in the 2009 vintage. The 2009 is the top-scoring wine from the retrospective tasting and the most aromatically alluring, showing details reminiscent of Café d'Ola and toasted shortbread, perhaps due to the oak. Still, new oak hovered around 70 and 80% until recent vintages, when it has been dialed back to around 60%. A big push toward increasing production began early in the following decade. In 2012, Hobbs began planting vines surrounding the winery, which opened in 2007, and neighbors Marchiori. Starting in 2018, that new vineyard, designated Hobbs Estate, and the 42-acre Chañares Estate in Los Arboles, acquired in 2013, would become primary sources for Cobos. Chañares, situated at an elevation of 3,800 feet, in alluvial stony soils, provided a fresh, structured contrast to the plush nature of Marchioli from a warmer locale. But Hobbs didn't combine the two right away. After acquiring Chañares, he bottled the 2014 to 2016 vintages separately, perhaps another homework experiment. We sampled the 2014 Marchiori rather than the Chañares for continuity's sake, and it was still very much a wine of its times, a ripe and concentrated version built around roasted plum and fig tart flavors. This period marks a real dividing line, not just in wine styles, but also in management. Hobbs says that Barraud and Marchiori, who lived on the Marchiori property, sought a house in a more protected neighborhood. Hobbs thought Barraud wasn't giving either the vineyard or the wines the attention they needed, and he admits there was a dip in quality. He later severed ties with Barraud and Marchiori and brought in new partners. From 2014, we jumped to the 2017, which was 100% Chañares grapes due to the instability at Marchiori. It also shows the biggest stylistic shift, evoking mountain herb and floral raspberry aromas and flavors. Subsequent vintages see the harmonizing of Vinha Cob's two estate vineyards with trace amounts of Marchiori still mixed in annually, yet the Chañares dominating the blend. That balance signals a shift to a more modern, cooler climate version of Malbec from Uco Valley, rather than from the old vines in warmer Luján de Cuyo. Today, Hobbs, José Jiménez, and Carlos de Carlos are the strategic team that leads Vinha Cobos, which has grown to 75 employees. We're making a lot of investments, and our farming is also radically changing. Hobbs says, crediting the team for improving quality in recent years. We're young, dynamic, always thinking, and have a lot of attention to detail. The current release 2021 vintage is up to 75% Chañares and shows a new winemaking element. We're using more of a Pinot Noir approach to fermentation with open-top fermenters, Hobbs says, noting that some whole cluster inclusion also results in carbonic maceration. This new method from Cool Vintage shows off intense floral details with a polished and elegant feel while maintaining fine tannin structure. Alcohol has tapered off since 2017, sitting around 14.5 with total acidity slightly higher. Over the past 5 vintages, Cobos has evolved from a lush, ripe, and opulent style into a multi-layered red that is built for the cellar, balancing richness and power with finesse. In the very first conversation I had with Hobbs after I took over the South American tasting beat, he told me his definition of a noble wine. He said that it should reflect terroir, but to prove that, it had to be able to age. I reminded him of that conversation during our retrospective tasting and asked him again, in light of our journey into the past, about Malbec's ageability. Malbec's ageworthiness is confirmed, he said. Of course, our winemaking today is much better than it was back then. There's no doubt that these new wines will outage the others. As for the future, Hobbs says quality is always the top priority, teasing the idea of exploring Patagonia for a potential new Pinot Noir project. We explored it, but we haven't done it, he says. It took a long time to build up the strength of the company, slowly accumulating a couple of vineyards. I think in the future we will have a lot to work with, but right now, I'd say just continue to make better wines. Tasting Viña Cobos Malbec Cobos. Viña Cobos, Malbec Mendoza Cobos 2021, 95 points. Very aromatic and elegant, with mountain herbs, dried flowers, and orange peel mixing in with a polished core of red tea, inflected raspberry coulis flavors, showing vibrant lift before stretching out around fine tannins. For all its finesse, this has muscle. Drink now through 2040. Viña Cobos, Malbec Mendoza Cobos 2018, 96 points. Balances elegance and muscle with mountain herb and spice details that gather around a rich yet vibrant core of fresh berry and mineral flavors with acidity lending tension. Finishes plush and round, but with enough tannins to warrant more age. Drink now through 2040. Viña Cobos, Malbec Pedril Cobos Marchiori Vineyard Block C2 2014, 94 points. Rich and concentrated, this is built around roasted plum and fig tart flavors with abundant 5-spice and black tea notes. Everything comes together on the finish around a coating of cocoa powder and caressing tannins. Drink now through 2035. Viña Cobos, Malbec Pedril Cobos Marchioli Vineyard 2009. An absolute stunner. This opens with expressive, aromatic details, reminiscent of Café d'Ola and toasted shortbread. On the palate, there's a polished elegance with floral blueberry and plum flavors at the center with an edge of saline acidity that lifts the flavors onto a lengthy finish around integrated tannins. Drink now through 2034. Viña Cobos, Malbec Pedril Cobos Marchioli Vineyard 2003, 96 points. After 21 years, this shows mature elegance without missing Malbec's identity. Dried violet aromas mixed with Assam tea and dried mint, while the palate shows impressive vibrancy with a wild herb cast to the dried raspberry and cherry core. There's still enough grip to suggest a few more years of age, but why wait? Drink now through 2028. This is Steve, and I've been reading from The Wine Spectator.